Now, let's take a look at the weekly cycles in the United States of America as an example of how the deceptive New World Order is being used in the destruction of truth within Christianity. After looking at the weekly cycles of some of the other nations of the world, which day do you think is the last day of the week in the United States?
Now, Sundays are catch-all days. The seventh day is spent stocking the shelves, doing the laundry, cooking a week's worth of meals.
Just as Ms. Washington has stated, it seems that today many Americans consider Sunday to be the seventh day of the week. At first, the common belief in the United States that Sunday is the seventh day of the week may seem strange, for if we take a look at the table and wall calendars that have been produced in the United States, they generally identify Saturday as the seventh day of the week. So why do many Americans think that Sunday is the seventh day of the week, when most of their calendars place Saturday on the last day of the week? Well, there are a number of influencing factors. First of all, there is the church. Though it is unscriptural, most pastors and priests claim that Sunday is the Sabbath. So when their parishioners read in the Bible that the Sabbath is the seventh day of the week, they automatically think of Sunday as that day. Thus, it is easy to understand why they might think of Sunday as the last day of the week. Though most dictionaries identify Sabbath as the seventh day of the week, they generally attach the name of Sunday to the Sabbath as well. This, too, encourages people to think of Sunday as the seventh day of the week. Another contributing factor is that here and there are calendars which place Sunday on the last day of the week instead of the first day of the week. Here are a few examples. This calendar with Sunday as the seventh day was produced by a broadcasting station. This weekly cycle was used in a doctor's office and was produced by a pharmaceutical company. And this calendar came from a scheduling book. You may have already noticed that many of the scheduling calendar books display both Saturday and Sunday on the last day of the week. For example, in this book, the small calendars at the top of each page place Saturday as the seventh day. However, the weekly schedule places Monday on the first day and Sunday on the last day of the week. These factors have all done their part in the conditioning of people's minds to accept and believe that Sunday is the seventh day of the week. And yet, there is something else that may have even more potential for conditioning our minds to accept the New World Order in the weekly cycle. When we go to most places of business, we generally see some sort of posting of the days and hours in which the business is open. The business hours or store hours are usually found on the front door or somewhere near the main entrance. Though many people are aware of this practice, how many actually realize to what extent their minds are being conditioned for the acceptance of either truth or error by this simple posting of business hours? When the mystical powers sought to implement the New World Order into the weekly cycle of the United States, using the weekly cycle of the calendar, it appears that they were blocked primarily by the resistance of Orthodox Jews and the Seventh-day Adventists. Nevertheless, the New World Order in the weekly cycle has slipped into American thought and life seemingly without these religious organizations even realizing what has happened or how it has happened. It is true that there are a few businesses which still list Sunday as the first day of the week and Saturday as the seventh, just as most American calendars do. However, it appears that most businesses use the New World Order with Sunday as the seventh day when posting their business hours or store hours, though it seems that few of those who post the New Order realize what they are doing. As we are looking at a few examples of some of the different businesses and their business or store hours, remember that the most powerful method for removing the truth from people's minds does not generally involve the complete removal of the truth, but instead involves the covering up of the truth with falsehood, while at the same time allowing the truth to appear once in a while. The most common result of this type of subconscious conditioning is that eventually, though the eye may see something unusual, the mind will see the unusual as though it was the norm or what it thinks it has always seen before. In other words, when the vast majority of businesses post Sunday as the last day of the week, and occasionally our eyes see a business posting with Saturday as the seventh day, our minds automatically correct our vision. As a result of almost constantly seeing Sunday as the last day of the week, whether it be consciously or subconsciously, our minds see Sunday as the seventh day instead of Saturday. With this type of programming, the truth becomes error, and error becomes the truth. This is deception at its best. As a result of this type of conditioning or programming, all too often, even if the truth is clearly pointed out, it is still not recognized for what it really is, and its importance is dismissed by the mind as though it is insignificant or irrelevant. And as love for the truth is destroyed and the heart waxes gross or is callous to the truth, man continues to deceive himself and others, even when the truth is presented in as simple a way as possible. Therefore speak I to them in parables, because they seeing see not, and hearing they hear not, neither do they understand. And in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Esaias, which saith, By hearing ye shall hear, and shall not understand, and seeing ye shall see, and shall not perceive. For this people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest at any time they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and should understand with their heart, and should be converted, and I should heal them. One of the main components needed for effective conditioning of the mind is the wonder-working power of repetition. And when it comes to accepting Sunday as the seventh day of the week, what do you think is happening every time approximately 85% of the world's population looks at their calendars, or as people enter most places of business, time after time, day after day, week after week, month after month, and year after year? We are being programmed just as truly as though we were computers. If we think it over, our computer is constantly fixing problems based on previous programming, and most of these problems are never even brought to our attention. However, on occasion, if a problem or security threat is perceived by our computer as being worthy of our attention, then a window appears alarming us to the potential problem and advising us to take protective action. Unfortunately, a destructive virus can take control of our computer if we have not previously incorporated the right programming or protection into it. Destructive viruses enter our computer by deceptively and unassumingly appearing to be desirable or non-threatening information. In other words, without the proper conditioning or programming of our computer's mind, its ability to discern truth from error is destroyed. And once even one deadly virus is allowed into our computer's mind, confusion and subtle destruction are sure to follow until one day, without warning, all is lost. In much the same way, if we have not programmed our minds with the truth, and deceptive information is not considered important enough to be brought to our conscious attention, what will be the end result? If our mind accepts falsehood as the truth, or if there is no conscious reaction of protest to destructive information, the mind slowly loses its love for the truth and its ability to discern truth from error. Once this process has begun in so-called little insignificant things, it becomes much easier for the mind to be manipulated by even greater deception. And the more love for truth is destroyed, the greater the potential for total destruction without the mind even being aware of it. Until one day. Why do so many people think that Sunday is the seventh day of the week instead of the Sabbath? Their minds have been subliminally seduced and reprogrammed, similar to what happens when one of those awful deceptive viruses sneaks into your computer. However, when it comes to our mind's CPU and memory, there is only one foolproof protector, and that is to both know and follow the truth exactly as it is clearly revealed in the Bible. Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth.